Okay, we're going. Hey, welcome to Blocktalk. Yeah, we're on Bitcoin block 510622. Thanks to Coin Cards for sponsoring the show. And as usual, if you guys have any questions, post them in the live chat. Yeah, so we'll take it away from live at the Decontrol space, and yeah, let us know about stable coins.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate that. Thank you all for being here. For those of you online in different places, you might not know, but in Vancouver we had a really serious situation of snow, and I'm surprised that anyone showed up. So thank you very much for being here. So just a bit of of explanation of how I got to talking about this. Alex Lebed, who's just over here, introduced this really cool topic to me not even 2 months ago, and he had this amazing background, a degree in mathematics. He worked for Amazon and Facebook, and even got an offer at Google. But what he really loves to do is chill down here and come up and think about the next big thing. And so I had the great opportunity of late one night bumping into him and hearing him talk about it. And well, long story short, I'm here talking about what I'm really passionate about and what I'm excited about. And it's important to understand that all the information you're going to hear tonight, for the most part, it's the dedicated research and the work of Alex Lebed, and I'm Aviv Milner. So why don't we go ahead and get started? This talk is I really want to do three things. I want to present a problem. I want to explore solutions to this problem, and then I want to discuss the philosophical and ethical implications, and really stimulate thought. This talk is intended to be very provocative. I hope to introduce a topic that you haven't heard before. And I'm really excited to hear questions, because this is the very first time that I'm giving a talk. So I've numbered the slides. So if you have any sort of questions in your head, just remember the number of the slide or write it down. At the end, we'll go right back to that slide and you can bring it up. And that goes to the live chat. And thank you all online for joining us. So let's begin by answering the obvious. What makes Bitcoin special? A lot of good reasons. First one, decentralized, right? That's a really resilient system, right? You can't kill it by cutting off the head because it has no head, right? There's no hierarchy, so it's more egalitarian. It's open to anyone. It's based on consent. Anyone can join or leave whenever they want. There's no pressure. It's decentralized. No one can tell you what to do. And it's trustless and secure. So it's secure despite being decentralized, and it's still trustless, which means you don't have to put your trust in any other party. And that's fantastic as well. And it's permissionless. So you don't need to ask permission to join the system. You don't need to ask permission to do a transaction. You don't need to ask permission to buy Bitcoin, except for the person you're buying it from. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need certification. You don't need identity. You don't need any of those things for the most part. And that's pretty cool. And more importantly, it's efficient and inexpensive, right? And I am going to use the term Bitcoin in a more broader sense to talk about cryptocurrencies as a whole. So just when I say things like Bitcoin, I want you to imagine cryptocurrencies in a broader sense as well. It's efficient and inexpensive precisely because it's digital. It doesn't have all of that heavy baggage that the current financial system has. It's global, so there's you don't have all these currency swaps. You don't have every border. You have to your currency is no longer good. You've got to swap it. It's global, and for that reason, it's really efficient and inexpensive, and that's pretty awesome too. So here's the first big question: where's the mass adoption? Right? Where's the mass adoption? I mean, there's really no reason why a merchant, for example, wouldn't accept Bitcoin, right? What does it cost them? Nothing. How hard is it? You download an app on your phone, you print a piece of paper. Is it secure? Way more secure than any credit card or debit card or anything you're going to have, right? Does it give you a broader audience? Anyone in the world can pay with it. They can be anonymous. Why? Where's the mass adoption? And there are a lot of good reasons. So the first one is awareness. People aren't aware of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Right? And once they get aware, they understand it, there's enough education out there, great people like Antonopoulos, writing good books, giving talks, then they'll join. That's a possibility. Usability. Well, Bitcoin is complicated right now. Once there are better apps, there's more things. The hardware wallets are simple. Maybe the phones will integrate a hardware wallet at one point. Then it'll be easy to use. More people will use it. It'll be mass adoption. And a common argument is scale. Well, the issue is that right now, if everyone wanted to use it, it would be really expensive. There would be issues with the network and all of that. So that's really why we don't see a complete mass adoption. I'm going to argue that there is something more fundamental as a problem here than any of these things. And actually, all of these things, in time, will be solved. Some earlier than others, and quite soon. But the fundamental underlying problem will persist, and we're going to talk about that. I call it the parallel problem, because there are two things happening in parallel. Well, here's me. I like to go on Purse. I spend my Bitcoins. I buy things on Amazon. Really cool app. I encourage any of you guys to check it out if you've never done it before. It's awesome. So Amazon, this third-party company, Purse, lets me put up my wish list on Amazon, and I get to buy a product. That's great. So what's the problem? Well, here's me, and I'm thinking, should I buy a really nice set of headphones, right? And on my right is the graph of the price. And I have this thought in my head, well, if the price is going to go up, why don't I just wait a week?
Yeah.
Buy the headphones in a week, get 20% off, or 100% off, or 400% off, or whatever the internet says, right? HODL, exactly. And, well, if it goes down, well, it never goes down. Well, okay, sometimes it goes down, occasionally, right? But if it goes down, it's kind of like, I don't want to save any. I want to spend it all right now. So there's sort of an issue here that two things are happening in parallel, and that is commerce and speculation, right? So on the one hand, I want to give some of my labor, some of my stored labor, which is stored in this Bitcoin. I want to give it for headphones. I'm okay to work 10 hours of labor in exchange for these headphones. But the problem is I'm also engaging in speculation. So I'm not just giving value to a merchant, I'm engaging in speculation, right? Because when I buy those headphones and give Bitcoin away, what I'm doing is I'm shorting Bitcoin and engaging in an exchange of goods. Because if the price of Bitcoin goes up a lot, I feel kind of dumb. And then we might hear a story in the news, some guy bought a piece of pizza, and oh, isn't that silly? He paid, $50 million, right? So, we're going to hear stories like that, and that's going to make me feel bad, right? If the price goes down, I'm also going to feel stupid. Like, oh, I should have bought everything that I wanted, right? Now I can only buy a little bit less. So why is this the case, right? Good question. Why is this the case? And the answer fundamentally is the nature of the Bitcoin network, right? What is the Bitcoin network? Well, two things. There's a currency in the Bitcoin network, right? And then there's the network itself. And the network is all of the nodes and all of the validation and all of the transactions and the security and the developers, all of that. The network of everyone else who's participating and the token they use to participate. And fundamentally, what a Bitcoin really is a currency and a stock or a share of the company, right? So when I'm holding Bitcoin, right, I'm holding the token of value, the currency, but it's also the share, and they're bundled together. And when the network adoption goes up, here's a picture of the transactions over time in Bitcoin. As you can see, it's not even linear. It's huge growth. That's great for me. Why is it good for me? Well, because if the network is doing better, it's kind of like, the share is going to do better, right? So those two things are happening hand in hand, right? And the thing with commerce is that we need commerce without speculation, right? So I want you to imagine you go to McDonald's or you buy your TV. You're not thinking in your head, oh man, I hope the Canadian dollar doesn't moon tomorrow. I hope it doesn't double in value, right? You don't think that way. You're like, 100 Canadian dollars for this good? Sounds pretty fair to me. I'm going to make that in 4 hours of my labor, for example. And in a month, it's still 4 hours of your labor more or less, right? And there's a two-pronged problem when we talk about Bitcoin as a currency. And here it goes like this. There are users who have Bitcoin to spend. They're constantly not engaging in spending Bitcoin. For a big reason is because they're worried about shorting it. They don't want to short it. They love Bitcoin. The network is amazing. It's the only decentralized, secure platform that really solves all these things. It's a beautiful solution. I love it. So why am I going to give it up to the merchant? I'll rather pay with my Canadian dollars, for example. And and I don't want to short Bitcoin every single time I spend money. And then the merchants have a problem, which is that they already sell goods and make a 5% profit hypothetically. And there's a risk because if Bitcoin drops 5% tomorrow, when they need to buy more goods to keep the business going, they just lost all their profit. So they also don't want to engage in the speculation, right?
You should define what shorting is.
Oh, sorry. Shorting is just the act of, it's the opposite of going long. Going long means I buy Bitcoin, I expect to go up. But if I'm selling off my Bitcoin, it's kind of like I'm saying I expect to go down, right? And a lot of people who love Bitcoin, we don't really expect it to go down. We think in 10 years it's here to stay. It's an amazing product. I love it. It's not going to go down, right? So we're shorting Bitcoin. So here's a solution for businesses. This is what most businesses look like. They have a third party called BitPay, as an example, who will accept the Bitcoin for them, take a fee, immediately liquidate to the local currency, right, and give the merchant that currency. That's kind of weird because now we have a third party, right? We're selling this Bitcoin back for Canadian dollars. I mean, it's the very thing I don't want to do. I don't want to sell Bitcoin. I just want to exchange it with the merchant. Well, the merchant needs to sell it, right? And this BitPay is charging the merchant a fee. I thought this entire thing was about third parties not meddling in and getting a fee, right? And now it looks like we're right back there. And that sucks. That's not cool. So I'm going to make the first really big claim that is not obvious. And a lot of the things I'm going to say are quite radical, and they're not common sense. And I want you to really think about this. And the first one is that currency is a product. We don't think about that. We think currency is a thing we use to buy a product. I use currency to buy my iPhone. But the reality is, the first big idea is that currency is like an iPhone. It's a product, right? And here are some products you know of, brand loyal, US dollar, the pound, the yen. And everyone knows properties of a currency, right? You've probably heard unit of account. Okay, an apple is this many dollars. I can really easily break up the dollar into pennies and quarters. That makes sense. Medium of exchange. I can give you the dollars. I can debit card the dollars to you. I can write you a check in Bitcoin. I can send the Bitcoin to you. That makes sense. Store of value. We're going to talk about store of value for a second because store of value is interesting. Because a lot of people think store of value might suggest the price will go up over time on average. And that's actually one interpretation of store of value. But I want to think about this for the purpose of currency. For the purpose of currency, store of value doesn't actually mean appreciation over time. What we really want in currency, right, is we want stability, right? That's what we really want in a currency, right? Even if it's stable but slightly inflating, deflating in value because of inflation, the rising prices, it's still useful because tomorrow, in a month, in a year, it's going to be more or less the same. This is the second really big claim that I'm going to make today. Currency requires stability. Okay? Now, a lot of you, especially the philosophers in the room, might say, stability? Stability against what? What do you mean by stability? Right? I hear this quite a bit. Bitcoin is stable. It's the Canadian dollar that's unstable. And I find that really interesting. I find that it's a really cool thought. But what I'm saying about stability is really this idea that if you give me one Bitcoin and I want to start a business and you say, just pay me back one Bitcoin in 1 year, I need to know that in 1 year, the amount of work it will take is pretty much the same as what it will take when you gave it to me, right? That's a very risky thing right now. I don't want to borrow any Bitcoins from anyone and then short that and then build my business. Because in the chance that Bitcoin goes up tenfold, I'm not going to repay you, right? It's going to be really hard, right? So let's take a look. We have effective currencies. Just like we have good phones and bad phones, we have effective currencies that do this. These currencies right here, worldwide used, not just in the country where they're made, but other countries as well. And we have ineffective currencies. Currencies that haven't worked. So we go through here. We have Venezuela's, I believe it's the Bolivar. This actually is from Zimbabwe. It's a very famous example, very interesting. We have it framed up here in the hallway. If you want to go and then take a look, really cool. But we actually bought one of those. They're actually worth a lot now because they're souvenirs. People buy them as a gag. So now they're worth something. But at the time, 100 trillion wasn't worth anything. And then we have Weimar Germany down at the bottom there. These are ineffective currencies. We're going to take an example of what I'm going to argue is the best currency in the currency market right now. And I think you'll agree it's the US dollar. It's the most widely used, most widely recognized, and so forth. And we're going to ask this question. Why? I mean, why is the US dollar awesome and or used everywhere, and why is the Zimbabwe dollar not?
Because the US is powerful.
Because the U.S. is powerful.
Mainstream.
It's mainstream. Everyone, no hipsters. Everyone wants to be with the mainstream. We're the hipsters because we.
Raw materials traded for the use.
Say again.
Raw materials are traded for.
Raw materials. So markets are traded. Like the oil market is all measured in U.S. dollars, right? It's settled in U.S. dollars, right? Well, I'm going to argue that a big reason for the U.S. dollar being such a good product in this collection of currencies is because the U.S. dollar isn't just one person printing it and no oversight. In fact, there's a ton of oversight because the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve, which is a private company, are working together with researchers and all of these things to essentially make sure the supply is such that stability is achieved, right? So this you can look at it as a company that is actively trying to make the product good, and it's competing against other companies, right? For example, the British government might be another company, right? The Zimbabwe government is another company, and they're just doing it better. And how are they doing it better? Well, firstly, the objectives, right? It's important to understand, and I didn't know this myself, but the Federal Reserve is a non-for-profit private company whose goal is solely to ensure price stability, promote economic growth, promote financial institutions, preserve the external value of currency, and maintain internal value of currency. And so you look at this and you're like, wow, that sounds really good, like nice. It sounds like they're out for us. And the reality is that they are. They're doing something. They're doing a good product for you, and in effect, actually getting a lot of power for themselves. Because if everyone in the world used the U.S. dollar, now the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government are much, much more powerful. So they want a really good product, just like iPhone wants a really good product, Apple, because they want to dominate and have everyone's attention, right? How do they do this? Well, fancy economics diagrams down here, but fundamentally, this is called monetary policy. So monetary policy is a field in economics that studies how central banks issue bonds, do all these things, change the interest rates, look at the activity, do all of these actions to change the supply of the currency in order to balance with the demand so that the price is stable, right? And we call this the quantitative theory of money. The quantity theory of money essentially says if you have more money, right, prices are going to go up, right? Because you printed a bunch of money, it doesn't mean there's more wealthy people. It just means everything's going to be twice as expensive. And so this is monetary policy. And what does this allow? Well, one of the things we saw was to promote financial institutions. If we look at money as a tool, excuse me. If we look at money as a tool, we observe. There's some water. Sorry. I talk fast even for myself.
Anybody with questions?
Just pardon me one sec. Sorry, folks.
Questions from the floor?
I think I'm good now. So money as a tool, if you look at it as a tool, what is the tool for? Who does it really help? Well, thank you. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. If we look at money as a tool, we realize that everything else in the financial system, what we call finance and commerce, is built off of the reliance on this really good tool, right? So fundamentally, having a bad money in your country, it really means you can't have all these amazing things that lead to a strong economy. And that's partly the reason why countries like Venezuela struggle. They have an inefficiency in their economy because they don't have good banks or investment funds or mortgages or insurance companies, because those companies, they don't have a tool by which they can actually engage in finance and commerce without also engaging in extreme speculation like we see in those examples. So historically, it's always been the case that currency, as I've described it here, and government have been completely one and the same. In fact, governments outlaw any currency that isn't the national currency. Taxes are paid in that currency and so forth, right? Now, we have this beautiful model with all of these amazing features that beat, fiat currencies and all these currencies in every single way, right? It's decentralized, leaderless, it's wonderful, it's efficient. But currency and government, it always has this model. So the question is, can we figure out how to, decentralize finance, decentralize commerce? So this is really the big thing I want to promote here, because it might seem like I'm saying something bad about Bitcoin, What I'm really saying here is something much bigger about Bitcoin. That the power of Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin, I'm talking very specifically here, is much, much wider than people think here might consider. So when someone says, for example, oh, I don't think Bitcoin will be currency, I might agree. Bitcoin will have an amazingly massive role, and it could be the thing that allows us to decentralize finance, decentralize commerce. So let's introduce stable coins or stable cryptocurrencies, right? This is the fundamental thing that is here to solve this problem. And they come in three types, okay? And I'm going to outline them here. The first is a centralized IOU, okay? Centralized IOU. You see the word centralized, a lot of people aren't excited. You shouldn't be.
I like Tether.
A little bit of foresight there. Very good. Decentralized IOU is the second version. And the last one is algorithmic stability, or we say non-collateralized assets, right? And if you want to think about this, you can think of, well, we'll get there in just a second when we review them. So let's talk about the first type, centralized debt. And the example here is Tether. And if you don't know what Tether is, here's how it works in the simplest terms, right? Tether is a private company, and they have a private bank that's physically located in, I believe, Singapore and elsewhere. And what Tether does is they take money from, let's say, clients, for example, or themselves, or an exchange will give them hard cash. They'll put it inside the bank, and they'll issue tethers to that person. And the idea is that every tether is, quote unquote, backed or representing $1, 1-to-1, right? And as you can imagine, it's a very common sense idea, right? Okay, well, makes sense, right? 1-to-1 backed, I get it. I understand why it's stable. And it's interesting here that a lot of people don't understand, why would I invest in Tether? That doesn't make any sense. Why would I invest in Tether? I already don't like the US dollar. Now you're telling me there's this more centralized, more convoluted, less useful US dollar on the blockchain? No thanks, I'll stick with Bitcoin. Well, the reality is that people aren't investing in Tether. They're using it. They're using it a lot. They're using it because they're trading and they want to go to bed, and maybe they want to short all the other cryptos. How do you short it? You go into Tether. Maybe they're in America where it is a taxable event, or sorry, they're in Australia where it's a taxable event to go from fiat to crypto, right? And so they can't trade with those pairs, but Tether is technically a cryptocurrency. So if they use those two pairs, they can get away without having to record all this accounting. So as you can see, that's pretty clever. On top of that, it's easier for exchanges. It means that an exchange can have tethers instead of having a US bank account. That solves a lot of issues there as well. So there's a lot of use right now. In fact, there are 2.2 billion tethers out right now. And normally, Tether is top 5 most used currency in terms of volume on any given day. That's pretty crazy to think about that. So although we say many bad things about Tether, and you're going to hear me say some more bad things, you're going to realize that we need this. We need something to solve this. And I'm going to show some better examples as well. And the fundamental idea here, the fundamental first risk, is we hope that this is really balanced, because we don't actually get to see the bank accounts, right? In fact, at one point in their white paper, they allegedly told you that you could withdraw the cash. Now it's not so much. You can only essentially get out of Tether into Bitcoin and then withdraw Bitcoin into cash. The first problem, it's centralized. So if there's a bank account and a company, the company can go bankrupt. The company can have someone on the company board who's lying or doing something in self-interest. And the US government might say, we're shutting all this down. This is all stupid. We're shutting it all down, freezing the bank accounts. Boom, that's the end right there. So we're entirely dependent on centralized authorities not messing up. And that's exactly what we don't want to do in Bitcoin. We don't like that, right? Private company, private bank account, and we have centralization. Now, I want to offer the second model. And in fact, there's actually a few things I'm going to say about Tether. Another issue they have is that when you hold tethers, you are increasing the demand of US dollars, right? Imagine if we all today took our Bitcoins, sold for Tether, the price of Tether goes up, and the company that works with the exchanges prints a lot more Tether, which means, allegedly, they're taking more US dollars. So by using this tool, you are actually actively helping the US economy and being a part of the very thing you said you wanted to escape. And furthermore, Tether and a lot of these backed currencies are themselves unstable, because it's a very interesting thing in economics. The value of a token that represents a good that has different properties than the good itself isn't always one-to-one. And so the only way something like Tether works is when exchanges work really hard to get together to print money as soon as they need it and buy it back when the price goes down. Without that, the Tether might be worth 92 cents the whole way around because people just don't have enough faith to call it a dollar, for example. So it's unstable. What if we took this idea and we made the debt or the collateral decentralized? Now, first things first, we're going to introduce a really cool concept that is now a few years old, right? And that's the DAO, Centralized Autonomous Organization. It's an organization that essentially is a governance structure on a blockchain, right? So essentially something like Ethereum, there are many examples of DAO. You know, there are coins like Dash that is a DAO. It's a decentralized autonomous organization. And this itself will be the company, okay? So we've now taken the company burden off of any private party. Bank account, well, yeah, here's some examples of this. So like I said, decentralized collateral looks a little bit more like this. Instead of getting cash, which requires a physical bank, and cash itself is physical, right? We're going to use the very things we love. We're going to use cryptos as collateral to create this currency. And if you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, so Bitcoin's like gold, this is like gold-backed currency, right? This is exactly the lineage that fiat went through, that mainstream currency goes through. And actually, we're going to follow that same path here. So we're going to use this. We're going to lock it up where it's publicly available on a blockchain. Anyone can see it. And then there's no need for auditing because we're always auditing all the time. And that bank account is there. And instead of a tether, we're going to call it, you know, a stable unit, right? Stable unit. So you can see he's smiling now. Look at this. Much better. Okay. So we're going to use a stable unit. And so the way it's going to work is that the DAO will set certain rules on how any person can create or essentially put their cryptos as collateral to create that stable currency, right? So we're going to take one example, which is a lot of interest to me. This is not investment advice, but Maker is the DAO, and they accept Ethereum as collateral and soon Bitcoin as well. And the way it will work is you will place collateral and you will over collateralize, and then you will issue debt out of there. So the company itself, Maker company, does not make any of the dollars. They're not allowed. So what they do is they run the algorithm that makes the dollars. Okay? And you might think, well, a stable unit, stable to what? And this is a really interesting question, and it's something that people really think is the killer thing, the mistake being made here. Is often we see stable to the US dollar. And they say, oh, why the US dollar? Why do you have to try to be like that? I mean, I get it. You're backed by Bitcoin and Ethereum, but why the US dollar? Well, we're using the US dollar for now because it is the thing we're going to piggyback off, right, in terms of the thing with most stability. And the cool thing here is we could do anything. So there are actually examples of the US dollar. There's examples of pegging it to gold. There's examples of pegging it to the Chinese yen, I believe. Yuan. There we go. Thank you. But in the future, we have an ability to peg it to something more stable, like a basket of goods, CPI. In fact, it might be the case that the decentralized, permissionless, distributed, free to onboard, easy currency outperforms the US dollar by 1 or 2% per year. That would be pretty crazy, right? So decentralized collateral, right? It's stored inside a piggy bank for everyone to see. And yeah, there.
What was that?
Yeah, so here's a question that a lot of people ask. What makes the dollar that is being issued here actually stable? So when the piggy bank produces this currency, what makes it stable? Well, there are a few factors that act on this. So for one, like I said, all the currency is over collateralized, right? Normally 150%, 180%, something like that. So you're almost putting twice as much as you're taking out. So that kind of gives you an intuition that, well, the money should be worth $1 if there's $2 in cryptos backing it. But further, in the event that you hit a point where you're no longer over collateralized, let's say you go below the threshold of, let's say, 150%, then your contract, your ability to get your collateral back by paying off your debt, is now open to the public, and anyone can come in and liquidate you. That's one model we've seen. And that's pretty cool because that means that in the event that you over-collateralize in the beginning, but then in the end, someone will come in and liquidate you. So that's the first incentive, and they'll do it to make a small profit, and you will have, like, you know, you will get to keep your, let's say, $100. And I know this is a very confusing sort of system, and I'm going to definitely answer some questions at the end. I see some confusing faces. And so the big idea here is we're over-collateralized, and you know, you might ask, well, okay, fine. I can see why the price is more than $1, but why would the price, like, what would you do if the price went to 50 cents? Well, think of it this way. The people who are issuing this money, they know in their head they have to pay off this debt. And the debt is in these dollars, right? And so if they see the price of paying off the debt is only 50 cents for every dollar they took out as debt, they're going to rush that opportunity to pay off their debt sooner. It's kind of like when your bank says, hey, if you pay off your mortgage really quickly, we're going to make the interest rate way, way lower. We're going to save you a ton of money. That's an incentive to do that. And if the price goes over $1, let's say it goes $1.05, people have an incentive to issue some more currency because their currency has $1.05 buying power. And they know in the future it's going to go back down to $1, right? And so then they'll pay off their debt for cheaper than what they were able to spend it on. And let's talk about the third idea, right? And you know, just to conclude here, the big issue here with this that some of you might notice is it seems like we need a lot of cryptocurrency to back our dollars. And this is actually what I think will be the future in the near to short term, something like in the next 10 years. This will be the model. And what's interesting here is that although this currency is the currency that's used everywhere online and in merchants and all of that, it's Bitcoin and Ethereum that will go up in value, not the US dollar, right? And this is fundamentally, this is the Federal Reserve, right? And this is how, you know, essentially we're replacing it. And the last one kind of matches what fiat currency is today, which is entirely based on algorithm and trust. And the idea here is that you have a DAO, just like before, decentralized autonomous organization, but you're going to have, instead of something to back it, you're going to have some monetary system where you're checking the price. If the price goes low, what you're going to do is you're going to reduce the supply. If the price goes high, you're going to increase the supply. And the question you might ask is, well, how do you do that? And there are a lot of really cool ways to do that. One way is to have people, you know, and so here you can see if the price goes up, the DAO will be able to issue new tokens in some way or another. And if the price goes down, well, one thing they might do, a very clever thing, is they might issue a bond. It's a promise in the future for more currency if you take your currency out of the market now. Now, this is pretty clever because it's exactly what the Federal Reserve is doing. So we're saying, well, okay, you know, we like what you do there at the Federal Reserve, but I think we could replace you with like 50 lines of Python. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're just going to take everything you're saying. We read all your books. We saw the history. Great. Okay, give us a few days, a few months. We'll take it from here. We'll be much faster. We'll do exactly what you do. And here's some interesting examples. But what's cool is that when you try to mimic an old institution, you find out that there are better and simpler ways to do what you wanted to do that the older system, the legacy system, couldn't do. And now you can do it in much cleverer ways. I'm going to give you one really cool example that I think will be interesting here. In this example, there isn't even a DAO. There's no governance. Instead, someone releases a coin and they release 1,000. And the way it works is that people will buy them and then they will choose to park their money. If they want to speculate, they can say, I'm going to park my money and I'm going to allow this parked money to act as the monetary mechanism. So in other words, if you need to print more money, print it to me. Give me the new money. And if you want to withdraw the money, reduce the supply, simply freeze exactly how much you want from my account, right? And that way, it'll keep freezing as demand goes down. And at one point, when the demand goes back up, it'll unfreeze and then reward. And the interesting thing here is that is really, really streamlined, and everyone can act as a speculator, and benefit from the seniorage of the new shares. And that's pretty interesting. So here are some really cool examples of this algorithmic stability. And the one I mentioned, by the way, is Carbon. Basecoin actually resembles the bond market by issuing bonds and printing currency. Very cool. All of these, for the most part, except for, I believe, Carbon, has the governance token. So you can actually be a part of the governance and the voting and the decision making and actually own a piece of the new Federal Reserve, which is really cool. A 10-year-old could own $5 stock of the Federal Reserve. Now, that is really awesome. Well, some problems that you might have anticipated is that what happens if demand just keeps going down? And here, America has a pretty big advantage because America uses a really cool trick in finance. It's called using force. Now, if you use force, things are much more streamlined for your product. If you force everyone to use your product, turns out people will gladly use your product. Just please don't shoot us. Right? For the love of God. So if it turns out America, they can just close the border, have a line, say this is America, no Canadian dollars, no euros, you can exchange it, no businesses are allowed to accept anything but this. You have to pay taxes in this currency, yada, yada, yada. So they use force. But in this model, you can't really force the demand to go up because in America, it's kind of a given that a population will grow, GDP will grow. So they have that really big advantage that there's more demand always in the system. In fact, sometimes there's not enough demand, so they'll politely go to another country, murder the dictator or whatever there, institute their own dictator, make everyone use US dollars. It's cool what force can do for business. Yeah, so here the issue is that if demand just goes down, what happens is, well, all the money just gets frozen and this thing sort of collapses. And the worst part is that just like the US dollar, the collapse will be quite quick. Like we see this very often with like Zimbabwe, the collapse of the dollar really it's stable and then it's not. Like once people lose faith, it is really bad because they start adopting other things. Right? And here, you can only issue so many bonds because when you're issuing bonds, you're actually increasing the supply. And that's a really big downside of America. America has no effective way of completely getting rid of money from the system. They can't. They can only print money or print future money, which is what a bond is. So the last thing I want to talk about is I want to take the current framework and I want to propose what I think is a more logical, a more coherent, and actually much cooler framework for the future and get your feedback. Here's the current framework of the cryptocurrency space. See all your favorite cryptocurrencies there? There's 10,000 more. Okay. We're going to take an example. Just an example here. I don't want to get personal or anything like this, but we're going to take Filecoin as an example. Here's the current philosophy of cryptocurrencies. Number one, the product that you're doing when you're building your coin is decentralized. So what did Filecoin do? They said, well, file storage should be decentralized. That's awesome, okay? That's a great idea. But all ideas in this space are really Airbnb should be decentralized. Filecoin should be decentralized. Number two, the coin is you need to use the product. So we're going to make the coin, and you have to use our coin to use the product, okay? Three, coin also acts as a share. So the company starts all the coins, they print them out, and the ICO acts as a fundraiser. So again, we have that problem where the coin is also a share. And all of the infrastructure and security needed to make this function, so all the apps, of the blockchain, the security, the cryptography, all of that has to be done by the same company right here. That's interesting. Now here's some assumptions that you can derive from this. Number one, only decentralized products. Well, that's interesting because I feel like one thing that's unfortunate in this space is that there are a lot of centralized products. For example, making teriyaki chicken, right? It's not everyone's making it for me. It's like one store is making it, right? There are a lot of centralized products that could be made better if they had a more decentralized infrastructure behind it, right? But the product itself doesn't have to be decentralized, right? A lot of products aren't. And number two, the assumption people will hold hundreds of coins. They're going to have a wallet. It's going to have 10,000 coins. They're going to shuffle through them. It's going to be no worry. The wallet will just be built in. The developers will love it when there's 10,000 new coins per day and they have to integrate all of them. They love that kind of stuff. And every wallet will be a portfolio. So you're going to be walking around and your wallet's just doing this all the time. Everything's going up and down. You're a walking, talking S&P 500. Just when you want to go to the grocery store to buy milk, which is decentralized, grapefruit decentralized, everything's decentralized, everything has its own coin. And the value of the coins is speculative, right? Which again comes down to they'll be traded on the free market, and if the coins go up, it's because the network is doing better. And coins will do everything in the blockchain. So the coin itself, with the exception of, for example, tokens on Ethereum, the coin will take care of everything. And here I use this term it's very important how I'm going to use this. I mean everything. I mean they make the blockchain, which is a distributed consensus algorithm, which is a whole branch of computer science. They're also monetary theorists because they're making how many coins and how they're going to be distributed. They're also game theoreticians because they know how to make sure the coins are in the right place and all of this. They're also business people because they know how to make the business. They're also cryptographers and other branch of mathematics. They're everything. They're doing everything all at once, right? And I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to wrap up here by taking these assumptions and turning them on their head. This is the first time I did this, and so the slides were not all complete. Apologize for that. I'm just going to walk through what I think the future will look like in cryptocurrency. So the first thing is we need to expand to any product. And I think we'll get back to this. Number two, people will hold hundreds of coins. When we have a stable currency, business people don't need to focus on all of these things. Instead, businesses can think, look, I have a great idea. And like most people in the 21st century, it's going to be available to buy online. So I have to think, what's the best way to be in business and to operate as a business? You're going to realize that there are two tools that are really useful. Number one, they're going to make a DAO, right? So right now, if you want to start a business, you get a lawyer, you sign the paperwork, you do all these things. But in this case, to make a DAO is literally just to print a currency. And they're not going to sell it to people as an ICO. And instead, what they'll do is they'll say, well, us three, we're going to collaborate. We trust each other. We're good friends. 33%, 50%, 50%. We're going to make 1 million of these tokens. We're all going to have them. And what they're going to do is they're going to accept any stable coins. Because again, like a business, they don't want to speculate. They don't want to do the currency and the security of the blockchain. Instead, they're going to accept stable currencies. And those currencies, when given to that website, will be automatically, for example, distributed to all shareholders, right? Now, why is this model so much more interesting than the previous model? Well, number one, it'll take a person a few hours to set up a business, an international business where they don't even need to know the other parties. Number two, all revenue and all money going in is totally transparent and it's international. So immediately, if you're taking PayPal, that's 50 countries. You accept stable coins, that's anyone in the world with Bitcoin and access to an exchange. Now the value of those shares they created, it actually isn't to do with the shares going up and down in price so much, or the fact that everyone's going to join the network. It pays dividends. That's the point of the share. You hold the share because you're like, man, that site is an awesome site. It's doing a great job. I support it. I like it. I want to be a part of the governance. I want to be a part of the team that makes the site great. And I want to get a cut of the profits. Just imagine if Netflix said, wait a second, we don't have to sell equity. We can just make a DAO, accept Ethereum as well, for example, or stable tokens for Netflix. And then we can sell those shares when the revenue is really, really high. And we can do this all without lawyers in a very streamlined way. Every wallet won't be a portfolio. People will get to choose what they believe is the stable currency of their choice. Some people will still use Bitcoin. I probably will for sure use Bitcoin. Some people will use one stable coin over another. For the first time ever, we have a free market competition of stable currencies that are all worldwide. They're all transparent. So we know everything that's going on. We know the code. And it can always be forked to make a replica and try it again. And the value of these coins is no longer speculative. It's based pretty much on business, right? How much revenue do you have? Don't even tell me. I'll just look it up on the blockchain. You have an Ethereum address, for example, a Bitcoin address. I'll look it up. You don't need to send me your accountant. You don't have to lie to me. You don't have to make any PDFs. I'll say everything myself. And the most important thing to repeat here is that those people who are engaging in business, they can forget about having to do everything, about having to figure out how to build a good blockchain, how to make it scale, how to make it secure, how to make sure people adopt it, all of these things. Instead, they're going to focus on selling videos online or selling bananas or whatever they want and really just governing their business. So, I'm going to leave it on this note. Right now we are living in the old, or what I would say the current philosophy, which is that every day we have new coins that come out. And those coins claim they're going to be worth a lot of money because somebody will really need the specific item, and so people buy into it. However, I think that the future will be quite different, and we can look at history to really get a good glimpse of where we're heading. And it's actually very exciting because if you were worried about holding Bitcoin, saying, I don't know if people are going to be buying Snapple with it or Snickers bars, they might not. But their currency is good because it's backed by gold, digital gold, Bitcoin, right? And that gives it value. And that is really why I'm excited. So at this point, I would love for all of you to ask any questions you have. And thank you very much again for being here. Appreciate it. Just before we get started here, once again, Alex Levitt, if you have any technical questions, there's no one, at least in this space, locally, that knows this more than Alex. Like I said, he has a, he has a degree in mathematics, and he does this full time. He's very passionate about this. So I encourage you to reach out to Alex, and that's his email right there. Feel free to talk to this. I'm Aviv Milner there, and Victor is just in the back there. He's helping out with some video camera stuff as well. He helped me with a bit of the slides. Thank you all for coming. So I open it to questions. Yes.
So Tether is obviously the #1 single currency right now.
Correct.
Can we trust it? Because I heard not long ago that they recently got rid of the auditing company. And
right.
Generally, when you get rid of your auditing company, it's telling you something that you don't want to hear.
So
Yes.
Here's the simple answer to that is you should trust them, and even if they were trustworthy, you shouldn't use it. Right? That's very important, because what you're essentially saying is I'm going to use stable coins by promoting the US dollar, which is essentially promoting all of the activity associated with the US government. And that's a pretty radical thing to say. Like, I support the, everything. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, it's centralized. So the question is, will people, a few men in this case, will they do something in their self-interest to make money to deceive you? Okay? And if you think no, history is a great thing to look at, because it's always been yes. It's always been yes. If it's a little bit or a lot, that's an interesting question, but it's always been yes. Great question. Yes?
So basically, the main reason that first cryptocurrencies migrated was that the old system was not working. So how do you assume that this way of copying the old system in the virtual environment will work?
That's a wonderful question. Actually,
if you do the same thing, how do you expect different results?
Here's why. Imagine if all cell phone companies were made by governments and only governments. What I'm essentially saying is governments have hundreds of years of cell phone knowledge. Let's take it. Let's read all about it, see the things we don't like, and then we're going to make it competitive on the free market, something the government has never allowed. And by allowing many, many people to come up with various ideas and compete, they will likely beat government, because it's very rarely the case that government is the best producer of anything, right? My grandparents are from the Soviet Union. The stories I hear are really crazy in terms of what government does. There's an expression that my grandpa loves to tell me, which is, they pretend to pay me, I pretend to work. And everything is fudged, everything is a lie. If you ever, yes.
How can you read this kind of behavior? To behave like that in real life, they behave like that in virtual.
Okay, wonderful. So how can we make an incentive structure that is better than the Federal Reserve structure, that is more decentralized, but also where the people actually want to do good? So I'm going to take Maker as an example, just one example. They have a currency called the DAI. Okay, so Maker is the company and the currency is called the DAI. And here's how it works, right? They set all of the percentages for how collateralized it to be. They set the penalties, they set the debt ceiling, they set all of these things. They produced a decentralized exchange, they produced a website, they do great work, right? But here's the thing. They've built in that in the event of what they call a black swan event, where the Ethereum goes down so quickly that people don't have enough time to cover all the assets, or maybe there aren't enough people that are excited to make that benefit, Maker automatically prints new shares and buys out. They call it a bailout because it's exactly what it is. But in this case, it's really cool because this bailout isn't on the taxpayer, which, by the way, is the children that you will have or their grandchildren. That they're going to pay for the financial crisis that we in this room might have been a part of, right? In this case, we have the company itself, so they have no incentive to make this currency unstable. And more importantly, because it's decentralized and because it's on a blockchain, all of these methods of trying to lie about what the code is saying, those will work in the short term. We've seen that with Tron, and then someone investigates, and then everyone looks stupid, and that happens sometimes. right? So because everything's out in the open, that's fundamentally the idea of blockchain and Bitcoin is there's nothing hidden. There's nothing in Bitcoin. You're like, oh, I'm not allowed this information. No, you download the whole blockchain. You have every piece of code. Everything's open source. You can see everything. And so as a result, why doesn't Bitcoin, act in the interest of 6 people? Because everyone is looking at each other, and no one would trust that system if they did anything like that. And that system, that company is a collection of people. Could be you as well. It's a great question, and there's a lot more.
There is no incentive table, but I would completely agree with it. I mean, let's say the world of cryptocurrencies is going towards in the direction of anonymity. There's definitely going to be people who will find a way how to profit on the instability of this world, and there are.
Sorry, I don't understand the question exactly.
So because you said that those companies who would create those stable coins would have no interest in making them unstable.
Right.
But I would disagree with that because, according to what I see, it's not true because the anonymity is possible. So even though the blockchain
I see. That's wonderful.
The people who might manipulate.
So think about this, right? Why are people buying Maker, the shares, and engaging in that? Out of self-interest. Here's where the self-interest comes in. If exchanges adopt the currency and replace Tether, there are a few exchanges that have already made a Tether pair and a DAI pair. So you have a choice now. You have a choice of which stablecoin you want to use, right? If people adopt the currency, the more people that put money into this pool and it grows, more debt is being repaid. Every time debt is repaid, a little bit is given to the company, right, for issuing this currency, right? And so they have an interest to keep it stable. Now you might say, well, what if someone comes in anonymously, has a large portion, and then does something, doesn't care if people will get screwed over? Well, that's the idea with Bitcoin. So I can tell you that Bitcoin is fair, and there's every 10 minutes there's a block average, and then the halving happens like this. But you don't have to believe me. You can actually run your own node and verify yourself and reject anyone who doesn't follow that. So you can actually be a part of the system and run it, and no one's forcing you to engage with it. So I'm not saying that Maker itself is the one. Definitely not. I'm saying that something like this will come up and be honest and be the thing that gets mainstream adoption and is very profitable for the people who run that company, right? Profit in short term, but that's great. That's a great question. Yes.
So you alluded to using essentially blockchain as sort of the gold backing for some of these stable coins.
No, Bitcoin.
Sorry, Bitcoin.
Blockchain is a data structure.
Yeah. It's just the fundamental backing of Bitcoin then is the strength of all stable coins in that solution. But people are going to make money off shorting Bitcoin all the time, and psychology will cripple you if you have a run on the system. So I don't see the inherent stability. If Bitcoin does have those situations where it tumbles, it'll hit, might bottom out, might go up, but it's less tied to history right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to understand that the way I look at Bitcoin is exactly like gold. If you compare the two, you realize that there's just no match. So gold is decentralized. No one gets to create gold. You can't manufacture it. You dig it up. You mine it. And that's why we call it Bitcoin mining, is because it actually mirrors gold, not dollars, right? It mirrors mostly gold. And it's just way better because it's transparent and it's easy to move. It's better as a medium of exchange. It's better as a unit of account. You can't buy coffee with gold. It's too small to buy that, right? It's too heavy to move, right? And so what gives Bitcoin its value is that it's the first. It's proven to be uncompromising. It's actually secure. I mean, Ethereum, like almost everything else, has a much weaker network that is compromised, that hasn't proved itself yet. And that its network is there, and that people will always use it. In this room, I doubt if anyone empties their pockets, no one has gold. But why is gold a $7 trillion? That gold. Wow. Okay. Apologies for those listening. Someone actually has gold, so we're all blown away. It's just pure amazement in the audience. Okay. So most normal people don't carry around gold, right? And so, but somehow gold has a huge, value. Like a little bit of gold it's like an ounce of gold is $1,600 US, 1,350, something like that. Yeah, something like that. And so the reason why is because it's used by people as a hedge against things like stable coins, like the US dollar, or like real estate, or the S&P 500. People use gold to collateralize things, to bet against governments, to bet against markets, to bet against a lot of things as a hedge. And who owns it? It's really everywhere. Gold, the jewelry component, the electricity component, it's such a minority. It's all speculation that we all just agreed that this thing is super useful. No one can copy it. You can't make gold out of nothing. And it has these amazing properties. And so we use it as a hedge just because it's been there long enough. Yes?
Okay, thank you for the talk. I just love that you're asking the question on becoming essential commerce. That's super exciting for me. Like you're answering a lot of things I've been wondering. And then my question is, page 15.
Okay, absolutely. Whoa, right. So how a maker and the die work. So it's important to understand that there are actors that can create the die by collateralizing. Why would you do that? Why would you take your $10,000 of Bitcoin and put it against to make new money, to make this die, this dollar? Well, think about it this way. If you want to start your business or buy a new car, what do? You have to sell your Bitcoin, right? Or you better hope you have enough money in your bank. But what if you're like some of the crazy people, including myself in this room, who have a lot of their money in Bitcoin, okay? More than we're comfortable saying sometimes, right? Well, then the only thing you can do to invest in yourself, to buy a book, to buy food, is you got to sell your Bitcoin. And you never want to do that. You don't want to short Bitcoin. So here's an opportunity where you can actually back your Bitcoin. And this is the first thing banks invented. The first tool they invented was the ability to put gold and get a piece of paper that is correlated to that gold, right? And we're just taking that and then also combining this mimicry of the best so far monetary policies in the world. And then soon we'll overcome that down the road. A lot of these things I think will take a very long time, but I'm so excited to be here as they come out. So the first thing is people back it and then they get the dollars out. But what are they going to do? They're not just going to hold their dollars like, oh, look at this, I have dollars, it's stable. No, they're going to buy some Ethereum. Maybe they want to double down. They want to over leverage themselves, right? Or maybe they want to sell those dollars to someone, buy a car, and then pay back the debt later, which is going to be exactly that amount in dollars. It's not going to be higher or lower. If Bitcoin goes up, they still made a profit if they pay off their debt. And the debt's the same. People like you and I, for example, we might not have a ton of Bitcoin, and we might just be users. We don't actually create any ourselves. We might just go on the exchange, take a little bit of Bitcoin, and buy this DAI stable coin, which we know is backed. It's good. It's backed by Bitcoin. We don't want to speculate this month because we're a bit low on rent, but we still want to be in cryptocurrency. We want to use it. We want to pay each other back. And then lastly, the third person in this party is called keepers, and they're actually like free market. Anyone can be a keeper. That's the person that's sitting around waiting for someone's collateral to be just that point where they can come in, make a profit, and settle that bad debt, right? So people who issue debt have an incentive not to issue very high amounts of debt. I can see there are a lot of technical questions. Alex is going to be here afterwards. He can answer the really, really technical questions. So depending on how far you want to go, that's a wonderful question. And of course, the fourth thing, by the way, is the DAO, which is tweaking things because they're horrified because if things go bad, their stock is going to go to zero really quick, or it's going to go down really fast. And they want to make money, not lose money. So those are the four parties there. Excellent question. Any other questions? Yes, dude.
See how we're talking about government issued currencies, stable coins, this and that. I think we'd be kind of naive not to mention that Petro. What's going on with that? I don't really know much.
Great question. Yeah. Great question. So long story short, Venezuela got really clever. Is it Venezuela?
Yeah,
Venezuela. And they were like, we see all these ICOs, they're getting a lot of attention. So we're going to do what Kodak did in Long Island blockchain, Long Island ICT. If you guys remember the company that switched. We're just going to pull the safety by making an ICO. People think, oh, we'll just make an ICO, 500 mil, whatever. I'll make $1 billion overnight. Turns out they didn't sell any of it. It doesn't work. And I'm really confused why anyone would buy it.
250 million on the first day.
No, so that was actually debunked. There's a lot of great articles that were talking about how all these claims by the Venezuelan government that it was like the biggest ICO ever and all of this. Turns out that corrupt dictators who want power often lie as well. It's weird.
Get out.
Great. Yes.
I would just kind of, if you step back far enough, the eventual reality is that there will be an incentive, not so much that's profit-based, but that's kind of longevity and stability-based, where people will see the need to seed human ego and fallibility to math. And the reliability of these systems will have a tangible value that exceeds the short-term profits.
Bingo. That's really the big thing here. The big thing here is that the Federal Reserve people have told us we're just not smart enough to learn what they know behind closed doors, right? So no one really knows what's the interest rate going to be tomorrow at the U.S. government, or in 2 months when they're going to change the rate. Does anyone know how much? No one knows, right? Because everything is behind closed doors. It's unclear, and then only when they declare it, then we get to know. We're like, oh, okay, they're smarter than all of us. They did the right thing, right? So here we get to write what humans, human action into code. And the nice thing about code is that code is notoriously not, sexist or racist or tired or sleepy or greedy or changing its mind. Code just executes, and code is transparent. And so that's a pretty huge advantage, that we can go away from having one or two dudes behind a lever pulling things and hoping things don't go Zimbabwe. Which ends up millions of people just starve. Like it's really, really, awful. So we can go away from that, and that's pretty exciting, I think, as well.
The underlying piece. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I will jump to some different areas.
She's gonna take this all down. I can see it. So you go first. Positive note.
I was just gonna say that inherent human behavior, fear and greed, FOMO, etc. Underlying all of it, there is this kind of inherent optimism. Some like to spin that as faith, and when people have faith in a system, that's what leads to longevity, right? And that faith can be, ill-formed, but regardless, that's why we have the system that we have. Because for whatever reasons, people have lost their rebellious nature and have gone with the status quo. But once they start to see the value in these systems and that they can move faith that they once placed in their government that has long since shorted them, they can move it elsewhere and feel comfortable in that decision.
I have recently made a friend who is an economics graduate from UBC. He was born in Zimbabwe. He told me a really interesting story. I bring up Zimbabwe because he told me for many hours what was happening. It was really fascinating. He explained that in 2008, the currency was abolished when hyperinflation went so far that it was just unusable. It was too heavy to carry bags of currency to buy Skittles, right? Too much. And so the result was that the government actually instituted the US dollar and the pound and all these big currencies as the local currency. So they made it law. And then later, when they tried to reinstate the Zimbabwe currency, everyone was really happy not trusting the government. So we call this effect the dollarization. It happens everywhere around the world. In Venezuela, it's happened. This is a threshold where in the beginning, a few people say, I think gold and US dollars is smart government. They're saying a lot of positive things, but I feel like they might be lying. And then it hits a point of like 10%, and then it just explodes. And that causes an instant effect on the government where the currency loses its faith. So I like to say that you only have to believe one thing to believe that Bitcoin will survive, and that is that people are self-interested, that they're greedy. They'll act in their own self-interest. But I like to believe that you should believe in stable coins for only one reason. That is that eventually some government somewhere will fuck up. And so as long as you believe that's going to keep happening, stable coins will continue to be like an amazing alternative. And there's really one way. If you're in stable coins, there's no way you're going to convince someone, like, wait a second, I have to use a currency that's only valid in this little region of the world. How do I buy like a Japanese car and a Chinese, pants and like this, that? Like, what are you saying? Like, that's crazy. I don't know what the monetary system is. Wait, I can't profit from new money. This is crazy. So it's very one way. I believe like these guys might have some questions on our live stream. Are you there? Can we turn on the sound for?
Oh, hello, yes.
They can hear me. Live stream.
Yeah, we're good. How you guys doing?
Yes. Do you have any questions?
The YouTube chat has been going away here, but I was just kind of curious with the algorithmic one. Is it always required to have someone like have collateral behind it, or is there any systems that exist that have like operate without collateral?
That's a great question. So the question is, did the algorithm require collateral? And I believe this is an answer that Alex can give better.
Okay. Yeah.
And why don't you say a few words about that?
Yeah. So there are different approaches, as we've mentioned, using collateral, sort of like a gold standard dollar, and sort of like a mimic of a fiat currency. And it was very good questions. How is it actually better when we use fiat currency? Using this kind of algorithmic stuff on blockchain, like blockchain is cool, but nobody understands that. Why adapting the kind of simulation of a central bank, we're not going to adaptate the whole bad things which happen like in the countries with weak governments, like in Argentina and Russia, let's say. And there was a lot of talks about trust in the code and stuff like this. So from my perspective, it's not about the code itself. The problem with governments, not because the system in the central bank they use doesn't work. Like quantitative theory of money works pretty well. You want to put price up, you reduce amount of money. You want to put price down, you just print more money. Simple as that. Problem in these countries, in Latin America, in the post-Soviet Union countries, that government often spend too much money. Which were not allowed to spend by like amount of taxes they aggregate. So they have a difference, and who's gonna pay the difference? Well, you actually pay the difference, like normal people pay the difference. In Canada, it might happen the same, and US might be different because they kind of back by like adopting this currency by international trading. But what the solution helps you to bring control of a system, not by just some kind of code, not only the code, but shareholders. So this DAO system on the before slides, how it works. Imagine like you have a sort of a share of a company, like you just get some Google share or like a share of a stock of Apple. You have a voting right. There is some kind of decision you're gonna vote. So in this kind of central banking mechanism, this code is not like made in a stone. You also can make the changes, but to make those changes, you have to reach consensus. So it's a sort of like a more inherent democracy in that sense. If you distribute those stocks around the people more evenly and control the central banking system, not because of code more transparent. Central bank system also might be transparent, but the government have a control to alternate that if they want to. In the blockchain, control just spread by people. And speaking about those straight question, like kind of algorithmic how it happened, like two things with collateral and centralized, they not able to scale inherently. I mean, imagine like this. All coins in the circulation, the stable unit of circulation, have to be worth less than your piggy bank in a cryptocurrency. So we know what cryptocurrency right now worth, like Ethereum, about how much? Like $50 billion? It means in the circulation, impossible to have more than $50 billion like stable units. It kind of sounds like a whole lot of money, but in terms of like the scale of a country or international trading, it's nothing. If we speak about like money in circulation, they might speak a little bit better about that. About $90 trillion of different mobile assets. So $50 billion is nothing. Only third type, unauthorized, like a simulation of a central bank system, you might say that, offers to put on a blockchain that system is scalable enough to really satisfy. And how it works, I think we pretty much share it algorithm. The thing is, it doesn't work. I think it's people from this white paper forget to mention from a Bitcoin and Carbon that just kind of like issuing more bonds when it's necessary to pull price up. You just give promises to pay, like for example, price goes down of a currency. Start like a stable unit instead of $1 USD start costing like 70 cents. How are you gonna put price up? Well, you just ask somebody who traded, guys, could you please stop selling it for 70 cents? And you know what? We just stop selling it, buy our bonds or whatever, we freeze your account, we put it in some storage, and we'll give you your money back plus some interest, plus some percentage. And some people agree. and you just put price up until enough people agree actually stop selling the money in order to get this money back in some time in the future with percentage. But what happened, you actually get more and more coins in circulation. And central bank doesn't work exactly like that. Central bank also owns a like stabilized fund. So central bank owns quite a lot of money. So there is no slide about that. So, but there is different mechanism how you can stabilize this exactly a floating currency without collateral, under collateralized stuff. I call it algorithmic just because it's more easy to say. But there are different mechanisms, and right now there is no like golden solution which works. On like even like a base coin, like probably the most founded so far team, they just introduced pre-sale and it's finished yesterday evening. So we're on a way actually to discover the optimal solution of a stabilization. Right now, happened a lot of research. I made my own research to introduce like a multi-layer stabilization. But again, it's just a theory, so nobody knows how it exactly works in a scale of like even small country, or like when you have a lot of coins in circulation. So answer is like no idea. I mean, there's proposals. So was another question, right?
Okay, I have several of them. So I'm not sure where should I start right now, but like regarding what we were just talking about most recently, okay, you explained this idea, like this revolutionary idea of this system actually like being decentralized and like the people who would be participating in this having the voting power to decide what is going to happen compared to the centralized banks.
Yeah.
But in fact, the centralized bank were originally created as this decentralized consensus because people, the citizens of that state, had the voting power to decide what is going to be
Originally,
the
yes.
government decision, right?
Yes.
But it got so many people got involved in it that the voting power had to be delegated. So how is this not going to happen in this system?
It's an excellent question. So rephrase the question, like if we speak about DAO, it looks like a democracy. So everyone have a share and have a vote, like right to vote. But in real governments, we do not, except like Switzerland and some few exceptions, you don't have a direct democracy anymore. So you just elect somebody who's going to represent your like wish, interest, stuff like this. Well, nobody knows because the concept of a DAO exists not that much, like time, like couple of years, and very successful implementation of that. DAI is like one of them.
Okay, so we don't have nobody has actually provided any reason why should it work compared to the
truth. Yes, truth is not really. It's what usually designed a way what no voting has happened whatsoever. So because it's you just can make what is consensus, like 51% of all points in circulation, or 51% of voting have to reach some kind of question. So and usually you might decide in a way what you can make a voting, especially like essentially impossible. So like in Bitcoin, so everyone can stop just using Bitcoin. It's not really a DAO, but in what sense you have to reach consensus to adopt it. And theoretically, everyone can stop use Bitcoin because can't like bunch of random guys get a lot of Bitcoins almost for free, and everyone else will go in the field just pay a lot of money, so it's unfair. But well, it still exists, and nobody can read out of it. So just because the blockchain proved itself, technology, like very robust. So this DAO exists not because it's like sort of a democracy to make different decisions, but to prevent somebody make bad decision, but actually not allow that.
Yeah, but we have not managed it so far in history.
And
other
let's ask Bitcoin as a first attempt to manage. So I would probably might answer it's like more human understandable. Like
it's not the first attempt at all. We've been trying to do it for thousands of years, and
here we are. Yeah, it looks like it's a pivotal moment in the making decisions, and like DAO is not a topic of our conversation. It's just like one mechanism to govern this structure to do not make centralized. But with DAO itself is way beyond like a stable currency conversation. It's a very powerful concept which might be adapted in the future for a lot of different cases, a lot of different applications. And like stable coins is just like stable units is like one application. There are quite a lot of good examples when you use it for charity, for example, for different mechanisms. So nobody knows so far what limitations are because this is just a couple of years.
Can I just say
And I
one
hear
thing?
your-
Yeah, sure.
I think one good step we are making that, and I hear your concern, is that we are moving towards transparency, which does make it a little bit better.
That's definitely.
No,
Yeah.
So I'm going to give the short answer
Please
here.
have one step forward.
So it's not that everything got centralized and people just agreed that was the case. So people were okay with bills that were issued with the government as long as they were backed by gold. And then one day the government just said, in a big sweeping motion, it's not worth the gold anymore. You can't get it back. In fact, if you do, it's illegal.
Yeah, like
How many
do you
people
prevent this
were-
from happening with Bitcoin? Oh,
Well,
actually, we don't have the Bitcoin anymore. We just do.
no. If you have your private keys, you have your Bitcoin.
Okay.
That's exactly the difference. That's exactly it right there. Is that no one can say, the more you learn about it, the more you realize, there's no trap door here. There's no back door. If you lose your private key, you lose it. No one.
They cannot issue anymore because they just issued as much as they could with the current supply of Bitcoin. They just hit they just issued all of these
maxed out.
stable coins in the world that were
Oh,
possible to
well-
issue. And what happens now? Like, actually now we start to using actually this against the market price instead of that stable price. So it will lose this aspect of being
No.
stable.
So why aren't more Bitcoins being printed? Why aren't there 40 million Bitcoins right now? When Bitcoin is worth a lot. I mean, there are millionaires, billionaires with a lot of power, and they would love to have a little bit more extra Bitcoins when they're mining their block. Why is it?
Value because it's a limited supply.
You also have to ask the question, how much money do you actually need to function in the world to make it work? Too. I'm just gonna this is.
But you know what? Why don't we continue this conversation right after? Any more technical questions for Alex while he's here?
Any questions about algorithms, technology behind that concept?
That's the best.
I mean, the question was the algorithm about DAO. What is the algorithm actually? How you provide democracy there?
Well, the reason is not to promote democracy or even implement democracy, but to make a uncheatable stability. So, like DAO, it's some kind of structure built on top of a blockchain. Bitcoin is just like a payment system built on a blockchain. So, what DAO does, you have a control about some kind of assets, but to get some decisions how to spend or move these assets.
Can you explain SU in this concept?
Stable unit of accounting, medium of exchange.
If I understand correctly, stable unit is money or currency, and
Yes.
and Bitcoin is gold.
Yes, exactly.
And DAO is kind of the world central bank.
DAO, it's yes, you might say it. But like a government, I would say. Government which controls this central bank.
Oh, central bank.
World Bank.
Okay. So what is the difference then?
Yeah.
Difference between what and what?
So I have Bitcoin. So basically, I'm issuing SUs for the money.
Well, it's my
so how we all agree how much money SUs will be out there covering our Bitcoin? Are the SUs currency or money?
So the reason why it's not a universal central bank is because it's not forcing you to participate in this model. There's already 5 models, so we should expect 20 models, and then 50, and then 100. And so if any one model, we have suspicion, just leave. There's nothing that stops you from leaving, right? So it's the same way that Bitcoin was the first, and it was whatever, but it's not like the central thing. It's not like everything has to be Bitcoin. There's anyone can.
That understand. My point is between those triangles: Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, DAO, and SUs.
So are you aware of the Ethereum virtual machine? Do you know how it loosely works? So you can have what are called smart contracts, and they're code that the blockchain can run, right? And so that's where all this code is run. So Bitcoin runs a certain type of code, and it's limited for security reasons, for very good reasons, to not include certain Turing complete elements. Although in the future there will be some smart adjustments. Ethereum allows you to execute code on the blockchain. So you can actually see the code of a particular contract. So that's how it's executed. It's executed by itself on Ethereum. And Ethereum is number 2 currency in the world right now. So there's no way to come in and try to manipulate that. Like,
No, my opinion is Bitcoin is a gold, all cryptocurrencies are gold. They're
I
always
thought
like,
I actually want to do like
Yeah, it's
like-
what
what is SU?
So I'm not gonna give.
yes, oh yeah, SU is dollar that the company, like the Federal Reserve, the Dow is. So the Dow is the company, like the Federal Reserve, except now we can have 1 million of them, and you can join and leave in whatever, you own $5 share of each one, right? They take commodities like gold, right? Like you can think of these as gold, and they issue dollars, right? A product that is stable, and that's the product that the company is making, and they want it to be stable because it's a commercial and financial tool they want to.
In this concept, which SU?
Okay.
All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We were really happy to kind of, I guess, hang out with the Decentral crew and listen to their presentation. Yeah, we'll definitely be tuning in on future talks. It was great to have their presentation. Thanks so much, Alib and Alex, for putting together their talk on stable coins. And yeah, everyone tuning in. We'll see you in the next 1,000 blocks.